welcome to the Catholic Forge, a conversational podcast where we gather to explore our Catholic faith and discuss how it forms our lives. All are welcome to join in this conversation and journey. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Eric in Missouri, and on this episode, very honored, really blessed to have Father Paul Turner with us. Now, I was going to read your bio, such as is on your website, but I didn't want to talk about you as if you weren't in the room.
A good choice, Eric.
But if I were to read it, there would be some words used like internationally acclaimed, published, author, writer, speaker, expert. Some of those words would get thrown around. And even here on the table, we have some books that have your name on them. People can find out more about you if they like at paulturner.org, and we'll talk more about that later on. The golden thread through the Paul Turner experience is liturgy. And that is how I came to know you, years ago as, quote, the liturgy guy. And I think that many of my colleagues would recognize you as an authority. There's another one of those words on liturgy. And so I'd like to start with that simple question: why liturgy? Why not patristics or moral theology, philosophy, church history? Whatever drew you to liturgy as a study, as a discipline?
Well, Eric, first of all, thanks for giving me some time to chat with you and share some ideas with folks who are listening in.
Sure.
On your podcast. And thanks for that glowing review before I even get underway. I always say the title I'm most proud of is pastor of a parish. That's the one that's really where I've discerned my vocational work. Even though I've done quite a bit of writing, publishing, lecturing, I've kept myself rooted in a parish. It just feels like that's where God has wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. And with that, I've been able to do a lot of other things. But I got my interest in liturgy through music. I started playing music at a very early age. And from that, became a church organist by the time I was in 4th grade, 5th grade. So by 8th grade, I was pretty regular at church services, and then music was the gateway. Liturgical music was the gateway to learning more about the liturgy.
Of course, yeah. So, do you mean to say that in 4th and 5th grade you were accompanying for Mass?
Well, there are pictures of me at the organ in the church in 4th grade.
Okay.
Now, what I was doing, how well people were singing along at the time, I don't know. But but I'd already had several years' experience at a piano, so they were advancing me up to the organ.
Sure, you didn't just crawl underneath and play the foot pedals or whatever it was. Yeah,
right.
That's amazing. Well, certainly your work is very distinguished, and it has done a great service to those of us who really have a deep care and love for the liturgy.
Thanks.
And it somehow brought you to start this website, Pray Tell. Now, how did where, how, when? What was the motivation?
Well, Pray Tell is the website that Liturgical Press offers with Anthony Ruff.
Right.
So
I'm sorry.
But the same initials, PT.
Oh, yes.
Are paulturner.org.
Yes.
And this goes back, it feels like 15 years now, when websites were just beginning to proliferate.
Okay.
I remember asking some liturgy colleagues about it. I had the idea to create a website where I could park some of my published articles that were getting read but not read broadly. And I didn't know if that was a good idea or if it was, a kind of a selfish idea, self-promotional idea that would flop. They all said, do it. Put things up there because there's already plenty of bad stuff up on the web.
Right.
So they thought, just getting something going would be good. So we started back when I was pastor at St. Regis. I left Regis in 2001, so that it's almost 20 years now that I've had the website, and it has just grown and grown. But I'd say the main motivation, the original motivation, was I wanted to make my published works as accessible as possible to readers.
Right.
So the articles kind of drove it, and then I also use it as a place where I can advertise the books that I've written and keep linking people back to the publishers so that they can find out more if they run out and buy a book.
Right. And the most delicious part of the website, that glorious blog where people from around the galaxy are writing you questions about not only the liturgy, parish practices, pastoral opinions, and you answer or try to answer these questions. And so I looked today just curiously, and I saw that your first post, it seemed like in that order, was around 2012. Now that being said, when you scroll all the way down, and it says, you can go to page 1, 2, and then it goes all the way over to 62. That's where I went to the 62nd page, and I said, well, when did he start doing this? And so along with that advertising, I mean, were people writing to you already with questions?
Oh yeah, I was getting questions, I'm sure, long before 2012, 20 years. And anybody who's in any field is going to get questions.
Sure.
And I realized sometimes I was doing a little bit of research for people to answer a question they had. And I felt, it doesn't take me that long to do it. They have a need. I can probably get them an answer. Let me just answer them. But then these answers were being dropped into somebody's email box, and that was the end of it.
Right.
So I started the blog because I thought other people are going to have this question. And if I can put it on the website, then it could be someone would bump into it,
right.
It might answer their question, and it would save them some time. The blog has been growing. I think it's 420, about 425 followers right now.
Sure.
Something like
that.
that.
Yeah, great.
So it's been good, and several people tell me they love it. They find it very interesting. Sometimes it's surprising that the people who confess to me that they follow the blog. I had one guy tell me he dropped it because it just wasn't his thing, and I'm sure there are others in that category, so that's fine. But that's kind of how it got going.
It is marvelously useful to, at least to myself, and I also know to your good friend and to my pastor, Father Powers, where we refer to it often. And just the other day, we were talking, as we do, and we kind of got to the end of the conversation. And I said, well, Father, is there anything else that we should talk about today? And he said, well, Father Turner in his blog answered a question. And it was the one from yesterday about communion services.
Right.
And so we just discoursed on that. I mean, it was a very brief conversation. So I don't know that either of us, quote, follow in the mechanical sense, but your words are really helpful, not because we can't do the legwork ourselves, but to have that opinion from someone who's been in that environment for a while, who could tell you, well, actually there is a real answer to this question, and it's this. It's not like, I've read so many of them, over the years, and so it's and you are describing both ways people can access it. You can just go onto the website and look at it, but if you want to get the email with the question, then you just you sign up for it with your email address. It sends you a verification, and then whenever there's a new post, it appears in your inbox. Awesome. So to all the listeners, check it out. But I know that many of our listeners. It's quite a skew. We've got plenty of believers and non-believers, ladies and gentlemen, and Americans and around the world, truly. And so if you were interested at all to get that inside look of, what are some of the rules and some of the rubrics and some of the guidelines by which we facilitate worship for God's people in the Catholic tradition, but not exclusively. It's a good place to go, especially when those questions do come up. Where's the Star Spangled Banner at Mass or whatever it is. These things, and we have some more questions along those lines later, perhaps. So I appreciate the blog a lot, and I appreciate that you have been an outward-facing, giving, a contributor, a very giving person to that, because it is needed. It is needed, and this is only my 10th year doing this, but for someone who is starting out, who didn't know how to ask his pastor, hey, where do I go to find this, or how do I get through the missal? Not as a priest, it's a big book with a lot of tabs.
Yes.
All these kind of things, like how do I navigate that? It's been a really helpful resource. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah. You mentioned that the core of your identity, what you really cherish, is as pastor. And so now you're serving downtown at the cathedral here in Kansas City as the pastor. How does that compare to other pastor-type experiences? And if you would like to, if you feel that you can do it, not concisely, take all the time you want, but would you like to share some of that journey to the priesthood? And then, obviously, it's taken you around.
Yeah. I was discerning a vocation to priesthood at a very young age. My parents said that I'd never talked about anything else as a vocational call. And I've been happy. I've been happy every day as a priest. I've had 5 different pastorates now. It was maybe 4. It's Regis. I hope I don't forget anybody here. It's Regis, followed by St. Munchin, followed by St. Anthony's, and now the cathedral. So it's my fourth time as pastor. I've had a few other assignments.
Sure.
But fourth time there, and they've all been different. And so, somebody asked me just a week ago, Eric, which place did you like the most, or which one had the most problems? And I said, well, it's kind of like asking a parent, which child do you like the most, and which one gives you the most problems?
Sure.
I've enjoyed them all, and each one of them has different gifts and different challenges. So they've been 4 very different places. I feel blessed to have experienced a variety of the church right here at home in my own diocese. I've done urban, suburban. I've done small town, multicultural ministry with a focus on Hispanic ministry, and now the downtown cathedral.
Sure.
So it's the cathedral's is unique in that it is it's a parish that draws from its neighborhood as well as from quite a wide area. Every parish has people who come, and especially in the Hispanic community, people are driving across town to get to a Spanish language mass.
Yeah.
But a similar thing happens at Cathedral, where people just love it. They love the building, they love the liturgy, they love the music, they want to be a part of it, and they drive and make it a priority.
Yeah, sure.
Then, of course, we have the visitors to Kansas City who are here for conferences, and they'll come join in on a weekend mass.
Yeah.
It's a great ministry. We do an outreach to the homeless, primarily the homeless, but anybody can walk in and get breakfast 4 mornings a week and lunch on 2 afternoons a week. So we have that outreach, a number of other educational things going on. It's good.
That's awesome. Thank you for giving me a door into that, but I'm going to go out another door and then come back around the side door and get back to that door.
All right.
So when I was contemplating, what was the theme of this interview going to be, or this episode of the podcast, and of course then I realized it's conversational. There's no theme. It's just us. But it would have been far too highbrow and me just being not pretentious, but kind of thinking too far above my own level. I was going to ask about the institution of the cathedral, as Mother Church. Now, when I was in Seattle, in the Seattle area, attending college, I went to a liberal arts, very liberal, and anyone who went there cannot disagree with me. But I went to a Lutheran school, and I was one of 2 Catholics there at any one time, basically. And so I drove to First Hill in Seattle and went to St. James Cathedral. Have you ever been there?
Mm-hmm.
You aware of it?
Yeah.
And so Father Michael G. Ryan was my pastor for really 4 years, and then I took my first job in the area at a Lutheran church, doing youth ministry and music ministry. And even then I would still go for, like Sunday evening liturgies and that kind of thing. And so I was that person, who made, it was like 45 minutes to drive in town to go to the cathedral and kind of networked with it in that way. But what I was observing, and that you've somewhat confirmed, was that the cathedral did not serve in that conventional parish manner, where you have attendees but not necessarily parishioners. And I wouldn't mind even saying that in a recent homily you remarked about how the 8 o'clock p.m. Mass is jammed, but you don't necessarily see a lot of stewardship response from that. So I'm not saying we should go into that, but I was thinking about that. And since you've been at the cathedral, not for a long while, but you've had that experience with it, maybe another time we could talk about that. Unless you have any thoughts, any kind of inklings on that.
Well, the only thing is, now that I've lived there for over a year, I really do discern the cathedral parish community. There are people who claim it as their own.
Oh, sure.
And that is a group I feel called to nurture.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, we'll just take care of the visitors, we'll just take care of diocesan events, but there, as in any parish, there needs to be a core group of worshipers, contributors, educators who just make everything happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's wonderful to hear, certainly, that the cathedral is not a destination, a wedding venue, right? With all of its accoutrement. All the beauty, like you said, the music, the level of liturgy that you're maintaining. That it is a parish, and a very unique one in our diocese. It's wonderful. Yeah. So the door, I'm coming back around now. I'm running down the hallway, back to that homeless outreach ministry, and people will just be delighted to hear this, as I was just delighted, tickled pink, as they say. I don't know how, we'll get into that later. Well, no, we won't. But you had the occasion to interface with musical royalty. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
No, it's not.
Tell the story about what it, when we had lunch, however long ago that was. Thank you. It was a wonderful lunch. Tell the story about how you came into contact with this particular individual.
Well, for years I've been a supporter of the Kansas City Symphony. It's a great organization, wonderful players. I've made friends among the musicians. I get the rare thrill of doing chamber music with some of them from time to time. They're a great organization. I've come to know their executive director,
mm-hmm.
Frank Byrne. Anyway, Frank called me in February and said that he was looking for a venue to do a pop-up concert. They had a musician who wanted to perform for folks who wouldn't get to the concert. He said, "Don't you have an outreach to the homeless there?" I said, "Yes, we do. We provide lunch for those who can't otherwise get a meal."
Yeah.
I said, be happy to have musicians come. That would be great. Or if one musician wants to come, that's fine. If you really want a pop-up that's going to surprise people, breakfast would be, no one's expecting music at breakfast.
Sure.
That would be great. Frank said, "Well, we have a date in mind." He gave me the date, and which was a date when we serve lunch. And I said, "Yeah, I would find." He had a certain. He said he also had a time in mind. So this all sounded a little bit too precise, and I did a mental check on which soloists were coming to perform with the Kansas City Symphony, and I realized in a flash that he was talking about Yo-Yo Ma, the famous cellist.
Yeah.
And but he never told me what the name of the musician was.
Right.
He just said somebody wants to come. But I put two and two together, and Eric, I couldn't sleep that night. I thought, this is unbelievable. Yo-Yo Ma is going to come to play cello at Morning Glory Ministries for lunch. I can't believe this. So anyway, as the day got closer, Frank called to verify, and I said, yeah, everything's fine. We're set up. We're looking forward to it. A couple of days before, he said, 3 musicians are coming. I said, okay.
Okay.
He said, there'll be a violinist, a violist, and a cellist. I said, okay. And in my head, I'm going, that means it's going to be Noah Geller, our concertmaster, Christine Grossman, the head viola, principal chair of the viola section, and Yo-Yo Ma. That's what's going to happen.
But you never asked him
No,
to
I
confirm.
I did not.
Does the cellist have 3 singles?
Yeah.
Yeah, you played it cool.
Too much respect for Frank,
of course,
to do that, and he obviously did not want to tell me, and you can imagine why. If word got out, then
absolutely.
Then there would be thousands of people there, and the event would have been something very different.
Oh yeah.
This is a man who just wanted to come play for people who would not be able to afford it or be able to get in, and maybe just needed some nice music.
Yeah.
So I putting 2 and 2 together and hoping it wasn't going to come out 5, said I've got to be ready. So I practiced a little music, the piano part for the middle movement of the cello sonata by Grieg. It's a piece that I had played years ago with the retired principal cellist of the orchestra, and it was the reason I picked it is the only cello music I had at home, piano and cello.
Okay,
and
sure.
It was, and the middle movement was slow. I was gonna, if I had the opportunity, I knew I was just going to spring this on him, and I didn't want to throw a complicated piece at him. But I figured he's probably recorded this. This will not be an issue.
Yeah.
So I went over with the score in hand, just in case it was Yo-Yo Ma, and of course it was.
There he was.
So I was able to introduce him to the folks who were there. Several of them were flabbergasted. The majority of them just kept eating.
Yeah.
Which was fine. This is, you're kind of seeing worlds collide here, and for the guys who were down on their luck, there's a few gals too. Eating was really kind of important. So that was fine. Anyway, there were several other people there, including our concertmaster, Michael Stern. Mm-hmm. And during a little break, I heard Michael say, well, we're running a little bit ahead of schedule. So he was telling his little entourage, we may, maybe we should start to go. So I said, well, Michael, I have an idea. Do you think Yo-Yo Ma would let me accompany him on that out-of-tune piano over there on the middle movement of the Grieg? And he said, you know that piece? I said, yeah. I said, well, he said, well, where are we going to get the music? I said, I have it right here. He said, really? He said, let's go ask him. So in my dreams of how this might unfold, I never dreamed that Michael Stern would be walking up to Yo-Yo Ma with me to plead my case. And but I made the request. Mr. Ma said, of course. So we brought the piano up and we played the middle movement. So that was that's something you don't even have on your bucket list. I'd like to accompany Yo-Yo Ma sometime before I die. You don't even have that as a remote dream. But it was a very special moment. I was able to chat with him, and I thanked him for doing this. I told him he was bringing charity to these people, and that's a gift even greater than music, which is saying a lot.
Yeah.
But he really was genuinely tremendous.
That's a great story. And I'd heard you, and you left out some details. I'm not going to press you for them, but I really appreciate it, and I know that many of the listeners, like me, are music fans, and so they will be delighted in that. Just to hear of that kind of contact. I mean, like, I've met Lang Lang one time in Seattle, and Renee Fleming, I shook her hand and took a picture with her, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But Yo-Yo Ma is, I mean, he's at like the Bernstein level of American music royalty, the Silk Road Project. I mean, everything. So that's a real treat, and wonderful for you to capitalize on the opportunity not for yourself necessarily, but also to highlight that gift and that offering that you brought to the people. Yeah. While you were playing, were they still just sort of eating away, or did anyone take notice?
A few people would notice, sure. But there are great photographs of people just eating away while the two of us are performing.
Yeah.
And I don't think either one of us was bothered by that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just fun.
Wow. Well, thank you for telling the story again. The great story. We are almost out of time. You said 30 minutes, and we're about there.
Okay.
And so I'd like to introduce a segment of the show. I've meant to do it twice when we've had priests on before, but time ran out. And so here's our new segment called "Hey Father, Quick Question," which of course they never are. What did you say?
The question is quick. That's it.
That's absolutely right. And so I sourced, I didn't realize it until I went back and found the file on the Google Drive where we house all of our podcast assets, that I'd actually asked some friends on Facebook for questions before. And so I did it again, and I was very sneaky. I even hid it from you. I went in there and said, make available to all except Paul Turner. I mean, you have no reason to frequent me on Facebook, but
you're there.
But just in case you happen to see them, I didn't want you to have any advantage at all.
Okay.
So I wanted you totally at the disadvantage.
Good.
And so so thank you, first of all, to everyone who wrote in with these questions. We have some high level, mid, low. One of the things, there are two dominant questions. Mm-hmm. The first one is about the sacrament of reconciliation, confession. And the two words that appear most often are confession and awkward. And so I just a couple of them, and they're basically the same question. Is it awkward on that side of the confessional too? And kind of a follow-up, another extension on that is, confession is awkward, period. Is there awkward for priests when they have to do their own confessions? And a third, which is not about awkwardness. What is the best confession you have ever heard? And my note, kind of a follow-up to that, is, in your opinion, what makes for a good confession? So,
those are great questions, because they show people wrestling with the whole desire to seek forgiveness and wanting to do it, and it's true that it is awkward. You're talking through a screen, which you never do in any other thing in life, and yet the church offers that option out of a hunger to offer forgiveness. Mm-hmm. That if this makes it easier for people to step forward and say, I did this, then let's do it. Let's put up a screen. There certainly is some awkwardness. I think some people would feel even more awkward doing it without. But sure, there's sometimes it's awkward on our side of the screen as well. It's hard to read a voice. Sometimes you can't even tell an age, whether the person is male or female. You can't see facial expressions, so it's or gestures. So you're imagining a lot and hoping for the best. And the same is true, I'm sure, for the penitent. You just can't see everything going on.
Now, as a note for non-Catholics who are listening, who maybe only have the Hollywood version of confession in mind, certainly I don't even know what it's called, but the what we consider the traditional mode through the screen. Yeah. But we also have available now, optionally, face-to-face.
Correct.
So do you prefer one or the other at the cathedral? Do you offer both?
We offer both.
Uh-huh. You mentioned not being able to read voices.
Yeah. In many times, the face-to-face does open up more possibilities because we can just interact a little bit better. So it is another way, but I know that takes a certain level of trust for the penitent. I would say that can help quite a bit.
Sure. What makes a good confession in your mind?
Just honesty. Just people who are and people who are prepared. They've kind of thought through what they want to say.
Yeah.
So I also appreciate people who can dissect their confession. They say, I did these things and I think this is why, or I did these things and I can see now they had this impact on somebody else.
Mm.
People who are doing that kind of further reflection on their sin, you can tell they're ready for a new step in life.
They've really examined, not just the impulse, but the effect.
Yeah.
And how is it to go to confession yourself?
Or
to hear another priest's confession?
Yeah, I mean, either way, I'm happy to do it. I see a spiritual director and kind of use him as my confessor. So that's always open face to face. And I've gone face to face all my life. Most of my life. I just think it's been better for me.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing another priest's confession, that does happen from time to time, often anonymously, and a priest may identify himself. I am a priest. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I have a lot of respect for priests. Because I've had the privilege of addressing a number of priest groups for their continuing ed. I've really developed a high regard for guys. I've met a great number of priests, and their commitment to their vocation is just great. Mm-hmm. So I always feel privileged, humbled to be in that situation.
One of my most sort of impactful encounters with confession, with sacrament of reconciliation, was at when I was in the Lexington Diocese in Kentucky. My pastor was I can't remember the term, but he oversaw the continuing education, and for the bishop, he also arranged everything for the yearly retreat, which was called the commencement, I guess. I don't know. I can't remember what he called it. And we went to St. Meinrad. You're familiar with St. Meinrad? You've been there?
Yeah.
And so I would go and play for the liturgies, and it was fun. It was always the most fun was just practicing with the cantors who were priests and singers. It was just such a delight, to interact with them. But then I would also provide some music when they went to confession, and it was always it was very moving, especially to see Bishop Gaynor, for example, when he was still in Kentucky. I couldn't hear what he was saying. He was at the other end of the Aquinas Chapel, but to watch him go and kneel in front of one of the other priests for confession, very moving. As I'm trying to quietly play sacred silence or whatever it is, just to cover the air a little bit. Sure. Very moving. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. The other dominant question has to do a little more with you as a person, and that is in so many different forms here. Do you get lonely?
I never do, but I know there are priests who get lonely. But I have never felt lonely. I'm going to say never. There may have been 1 or 2 days.
Well, sure.
But I've been a priest almost 40 years now. But I have been blessed with many good relationships, lots of good friendships, and blessed with a love for solitude. So I'm happy to veg out by myself, and take my time. I do so much work with people, which I'm happy to do. That at the end of the day, for me, it's kind of nice just to have a little solitude there.
Of course.
But I know other guys who can't stand that. It's really very, very difficult for them.
One of the whole questions here, along the very same line, I imagine that could be a lonely profession. Is that a common concern, which you've addressed? What does the church do about that? If it is a common problem, how can we in the pews help? So maybe not for yourself, but for other brother priests. What can parishioners do?
Well, I think just be friendly with your priest. Be genuinely interested in him, but not prying. When he needs a little time for himself, let him have it. Invite him to do something that is kind of off the clock, even though because you are a parishioner, it will be on the clock.
Right.
But if you invite him to something where he can relax, some priests like it if they can dress down. They don't have to be formal for a certain event.
Yeah.
Those would be things that might help. I've been at some some gatherings where people say, Father, we just want you to have a night off, come on over, and you go and it's really not a night off.
Right.
They've prepared the meal, but it's really a
Yeah.
formal deal.
Yeah.
And people mean well, we love them and want that time with them.
Yeah,
So it's all good. But so yeah, I'd say it's a balance between caring for the guy and trying to learn about him and what his likes and dislikes are, and then give him some space when he needs it.
Here's a little more high level, maybe mid to high.
Okay.
It's a little bit long, and there are kind of multiple questions within it, but I think you'll see the gist of it. I've always thought that Mary had to be sinless because she had the physical embodiment of God in her womb. God cannot dwell with sin because his nature would essentially burn it up, so to speak, in a way of speaking. So how can we, who have at least venial sin, consume Christ in the Eucharist? If he's physically present, how can he dwell in a body with sin?
Well, Christ is more powerful than any sin going, more powerful than anything physical. So, this is the great gift that we have. He gave us his body and blood, said, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And at the Last Supper, take this, eat it, drink it. This is my body given for you, my blood poured out for you. So this is his desire to be united with us. And we say every time before going to communion, Lord, I am not worthy, quoting that story of the centurion. And in the gospel account, Jesus did not enter the roof, but still worked the miracle.
Yeah.
But here we are saying we're not worthy to have you come in. He doesn't mind. He'll come anyway.
Yeah. I thank you. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree. I think it would be rhetorical. Two more questions. Both of them are a little more silly. Is there like a shadow council where all the denomination heads get together in secret and make decisions on how best to minister to the earth? If not, why isn't there? The shadow council.
Wow. If there were, I have not been invited. I can tell you that.
It's in the mail, maybe, the invitation.
Yeah. No, I don't. No, it's a good question. I think the challenge is what is the forum where something like that would take place?
Sure.
The best I think that's happened is this Assisi gathering over a few years. I think that the last couple of popes have gathered some high-level leaders of religious denominations to talk about important things. So at some level that has happened in a group, but I think otherwise there are things happening in smaller dialogues to advance similar concerns.
Yeah, even in recent news with Pope Francis, there were meetings of him with members of the Eastern Church that were unprecedented for many years.
Right.
And of course, I even just saw a little clip from an ecumenical gathering in London where Pope Benedict was standing next to Rowan. And all these people kind of clustered together. So, and of course, another answer would be it's not happening currently, but there have been ecumenical councils in the past which did exactly that.
Right.
Last question, and actually, I've just been neglecting this in our interviews, but I should have asked it at the very beginning.
Okay.
It's sort of the standard question for the Catholic Forge guests. And so it's sort of hypothetical, just fun. If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Superpower.
So you can, telekinesis, flight, healing, super strength, super speed.
Yeah. Well, I'll go with flight.
Sure.
I'll go with flight. I think that's been something pretty amazing to watch superheroes do.
Yeah.
It's nonviolent. It is community based. It's interrelational. When
right.
you get someplace, it allows you to explore a little bit more of the great world that God has made. So I would take wings.
Wait, well, you want wings, as a matter of fact. Or do you mean metaphorical wings? Or do you want literal wings?
Well, however
Angel from the X-Men?
However it would come.
Okay.
However they can do it. Or
not like Superman, you just will yourself to fly.
Yeah, that could be. But he does have a cape. I'm sure that helps.
I don't know if it seems like it would just get in the way, but he's Superman. I don't know. Thor has to use the hammer to fly. He can't fly on his own.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent answer, and I know John, one of the co-hosts, he always says that's the best answer. I don't know if that's the case. It is a good one, though. This has been the Catholic Forge. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Father, for your time.
Most welcome.
And would you please, may I beg you for your blessing to conclude our time together?
Let's pray.
Yes.
Lord, we ask your blessing upon us, upon all those who are listening, and all of the people for whom they care. We ask your blessing especially on those who may be homeless, maybe without music in their lives, or looking for a better tomorrow, that you pour out your blessing upon all of them and grant them all the gifts that you have in store through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Hey, this is Eric back in the studio for the outro. Thank you for listening to the Catholic Forge. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will leave us a positive rating and review wherever you listen. How about 5 stars over there on iTunes for Father Paul Turner? What a great interview and what a special treat it was to have that time with him. Thank you, Father, for your time, and thank you for appearing on the podcast. You can help out the show in a big way by sharing this episode with your friends and family. As always, you can continue the conversation with us on Facebook and Twitter, and to get a hold of us, you can reach us at thecatholicforge@gmail.com. For more information regarding the podcast, visit our website at www.thecatholicforge.com. We especially thank our wonderful wives for their continued support of this project, and we thank you very much for listening.